review from last year on how to answer discussion questions appropriately, okay? And with the best chance of getting all the points on a discussion question. Now, put other work away. Now, you should use this not only when you're answering questions for a piece of literature, but in an English class, not only here in 8th grade at St. Joe's, but also in high school, in college, not only in your English classes or literature classes, but in your social studies class, in your science class, in your economics class, in any classes where you need to answer questions. You can think back to this method of answering questions, and there is a very good chance that you will get all the points you need if you've answered it correctly, right? So, we did talk about this last year, but we're going to do a shorter version of what we learned last year on how to answer questions, and you should use this all the time, okay? So, it's the ACE method for answering questions, and basically, it's a way to use text evidence when you're answering questions. What is text evidence? It's really easy. It's exactly what it says. Ariam?
The evidence in the text.
Yes, you're taking information from the text to help prove your point. Okay? So you're using text evidence, evidence from the text, words from the text that help prove what you want to say. So you use evidence all the time, or people, you'll use evidence no matter what. Whatever job or career you're in, whenever you want to prove your point, you want to support that with evidence. Okay? Whenever you're asking your parents to do something, like, I want to go skydiving, all right? You don't just say, because I want to, and they're going to say yes. Maybe they will, but if they don't, you want to be able to give evidence why it's a good idea and why you should be able to do it, right? And again, you'll use that in many careers as well. If you're a salesman, for sure you're going to want to use evidence, right? Because you can't just say you should buy this from me because you should, right? Because it's a good product. You need to say how it's a good product, how it's better than buying it from that guy who's selling it.
But if you're a lawyer.
Okay? If you're a lawyer, you should convict this defendant because of these reasons. You should not convict this defendant because of these reasons. Okay? You have to give evidence. Okay. You might see it as text or textual, T-E-X-T-U-A-L. It's the same thing, okay? Use textual evidence, use text evidence. So text is what? What's text?
Words.
Words. Anything in print. You text, on your phone, magazines, the words. The words in a newspaper, the words in a textbook, the words in a magazine, that's text. So you're taking evidence from the words that are in print, what it says, okay? So that's what you're doing. So does anybody remember this ACE method? Act?
No, I have no idea.
Anybody remember what the A stands for?
E stands for evidence.
A is pretty easy when you're answering discussion questions.
Answer.
I might have to switch it.
Analyze.
Yes, A stands for answer,
Oh.
and there's going to be a little more to it, and I want you to write it on this handout that I gave you, you're going to take notes right on there. So on the A, you are going, on the A, you're going to say, answer the question succinctly. I wonder if it would work with this one. I think it is. Okay, you're going to say answer the question succinctly, restating the question in the answer.
Is there a cat in here? Cat? I didn't want to say that, I'm sorry.
I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. And I'm going to.
It's pretty big.
I know, but I don't want my too big. Well, you get to see Cite too. All right, so A stands for answer the question succinctly, restating the question in your answer. Can I do this again?
Hi, Addie.
Okay, so what does the word succinctly mean?
Detail. Right.
Opposite of that.
Undetailed. Sad. Vague.
Without a lot of details. Concisely.
How did I get it?
Succinctly. Giving the basic answer. So if I said, what are the causes of the Civil War?
Factual, ability, and a third person.
Luke.
Third grade Shinobi War.
Hello?
It's fought between Italy.
Yes. Yep, bye-bye.
You still do. You're just at the end. Goes alphabetical order. You should go to office.
Okay, so I'm gonna move that a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna switch and go to the monkey's paw. If I said, because now that you are in 8th grade and you're going into high school, when you're answering questions about literature, it's gonna be less like, oh, what happened, or what did Mr. White wish for? And you know, where you would just say, oh, he wished for 200 pounds. It's not going to be as much comprehension questions like that, but it might be more like, why was Sergeant Major Morris hesitant about giving the paw to Mr. White? So where you have to put more thought into it, right? Where you have to analyze it. You have to say what you think, and then you have to give evidence why you think that, okay? So why was Sergeant Major Morris hesitant about giving the paw to Mr. White? Just give me a short, basic answer, succinctly. Ariam.
He didn't want him to get hurt.
Perfect. Sergeant Major Morris
I got practice in
was hesitant to give the monkey's paw, to Mr. White because he didn't want him to get hurt. That's perfect. That's succinctly. You gave a basic answer without a lot of details. That's succinctly. Okay? Now, restating the question in the answer. So you heard me say Sergeant Major Morris was hesitant to give the paw to Mr. White because he didn't want him to get hurt. I didn't just say he didn't want him to get hurt. I put the words from the question into my answer. Okay, so you don't just answer, he didn't want him to get hurt. You answer, you take words from the question. Sergeant Major Morris was hesitant to give the paw to Mr. White because he didn't want him to get hurt. Boom, that's the first part of your answer. Okay? The second part you can already see.
I really want to smell those.
The C stands for cite.
Pencil shedding.
Does anybody need the answer part still? Okay. The C stands for cite. C-I-T-E, cite. Okay, and here, what does this type of cite mean? When you see cite this way, it's different from S-I-T-E and it's different from S-I-G-H-T. What does this kind of cite mean? Logan?
On my new essay, I wrote my site as bigbraintelevision.org.
Okay. So really, this is a verb. So you cite. Okay. The other two are nouns. This is a verb. You cite evidence. That means you write down the information. You give the information. Okay. So you're citing evidence. So cite text evidence that strongly supports your answer is what, can you see that whole thing? Should I move it over a little bit? Basically. Cite text evidence that strongly supports your answer. You can do that in two ways. You can give a direct quote. You can do it directly by giving a quote. You can do it indirectly by paraphrasing. So now I'm going to look in the piece of literature, or I'm going to look in my social studies book, or I'm going to remember from my social studies book, or I'm going to look in my science book, and I'm going to say, for this case, we would look at our story, The Monkey's Paw, and we're going to cite evidence. We're going to write down or give the evidence that helps prove that Sergeant Major Morris didn't want Mr. White to get hurt. And that's why he didn't want to give him the monkey's paw. So, how do we know? What made us think that Sergeant Major Morris didn't want Mr. White to get hurt? What are some of the things you remember? Logan? He threw the paw in the fire. Yep, good. Let's just take one more. Sierra?
When you said, but I warn you of the consequences.
I warn you of the consequences. He said, I warn you of the consequences. Perfect. There are many more, right? But you can just give a couple, okay? So we can do it in two ways. So that's our evidence that made us think he didn't want Mr. White to get hurt. So if we are going to do a direct quote, what does that mean? What's a quote? Leah?
Something that someone said.
Okay, it can be words that they said, yep. But if we're going to quote text, it's not always what people said.
A word for word, a piece of evidence from the text taken from someone or something.
Yeah, word for word, exactly what the text said. So that would be directly giving evidence. So you would look in the story and you would find where Sergeant Major Morris tossed it or said or tossed it on the fire, and you would take the exact words and you would write them as your evidence. Okay? If we paraphrase, what does that mean? What does paraphrase mean?
No!
Tommy.
You take words, or like a quote and put it in your own words.
Excellent, yep. So paraphrase means that you still look in the story and you find the words, but instead of writing them word for word down in your answer, you put them in your own words. That's paraphrasing. Okay, so far our answer is Sergeant Major Morris was hesitant to give the paw to Mr. White because he didn't want him to get hurt. He tells him that he warns him of the consequences, and he tosses the paw on the fire. That's our evidence. Okay? Now, the third step that you're going to write on your E is that you need to explain. Explain how the text evidence supports your answer. The E also stands for elaborate and extend when necessary. So you might see me write that like elaborate, extend. That means give me more information. Expand your answer. Tell me more. So explain how the text evidence supports your answer. So now, you don't just want to write the quote. Now you have to say, he told him, he warned him of the consequences, and he threw the paw on the fire, which shows that he was trying to keep the paw away from him. He was trying to destroy the paw so that no one else could wish on it. He wanted to, however you want to explain how that supports your answer. And that's your answer to your question. Okay? It's a long answer. But it's really thorough, and it's really good. Okay? Okay. Any questions about that so far? Okay. We are going to move on to... Oh, sorry. Okay. We're going to move on a little bit to that citing the evidence part, because it's a little strange just to all of a sudden, put a quote in there, Sergeant Major Morris was hesitant to give Mr. White the paw because he didn't want him to get hurt, and then just all of a sudden write a quote that says, I warn you of the consequences. You have to kind of lead into it. So the next thing I'm going to show you is this is pretty simple, but how do you lead into your evidence to make it sound like a smooth transition to the next part of your answer? Okay, so to make it well written, this is what you should do. Now, I'm going to tell you, you could do these in essays too that you write, or you should. This is a way to do it in those too. Are you guys ready for the next piece?
Do you want us to write this stuff?
Yeah, these are just ways to cite text. So put this maybe underneath your E, underneath your explain. Ways to cite text. And I'm just going to put them all up there like that. There are probably some other ways, but these are you might say, on page 12, Sergeant Major Morris says, and then put the quote. According to the text, Sergeant Major Morris threw the paw on the fire. Or in paragraph 4, Sergeant Major Morris threw the paw on the fire. Okay? These are just ways to transition into that evidence so that it is a very smooth and clear way of introducing that evidence. Here's another one. An example from the text. What?
Can I just do a few of them?
Yeah. But you could use and look at it when you're writing. Okay? Any questions on that, where you use this? So it comes in the middle of your answer, so you're not just throwing a quote in there. Okay? No questions? All right, I have a homework assignment for you then. Oh, wait a minute. First of all, I'm not going to require you to, but my suggestion would be to kind of cut this out and glue it into your reading notebook so that you have it, so that you don't lose it, so that you can reference it when you're answering questions. Okay? Now, you may remember this better when you get the questions because you did something very similar to it last year. These are discussion questions.
Oh, no.
I don't remember anything.
For the monkey's paw, where you are using the ACE method to answer the questions. And on here, it's even written out there for you. Answer, cite, explain, and it even reminds you that you have to do that.
Oh, this is pretty easy.
Oh, there's a bad
Easy one. Okay,
No, not the back.
I am
I meant this.
Yeah, okay? So that's homework for tomorrow. Your discussion questions for the monkey's paw. Before we move on to the next thing, oh, and you should write that in your planner, by the way. I will put it up here too. Because we want you to practice the habits so that you're good at it. So that we're teaching you the habits and then you can decide what works for you when you get older.
Big.
Are you expelled?
No, I'm suspended.
Dang.
Let's go.
What did you do, Luke?
What?
You're joking,
You
right?
actually do.
You're
No.
joking, right?
What's the name? You got
Totally.
suspended. No, what?
And you got
Guys,
free.
there
Okay.
is no reason to be talking to Luke as he enters the classroom. You should be writing this in your planner.
What?
You actually got suspended?
I could be.
All right.
But no, I gotta check up.
So Luke, these questions are homework due tomorrow, okay? And you may want to, I'll send you the notes that we took on here. I'll send them to your St. Joe's apps, okay? And you can copy them down, okay? All right. Put that away and take out your Voyages book.
Wait, college?
Put that away. Take out your Voyages book.
I'll grab my book.
Sure. All right, we are on page 8. In your Voyages book, page 8. Oh, yes. Before we move on, we've been doing a lot of work with the monkey's paw. We've looked at annotating, we've looked at parts of plot, we've looked at mood. What else have we looked at? We annotated for mood, we looked at foreshadowing. There is going to be a test on the monkey's paw, actually tomorrow,
Wait, what?
okay? Tomorrow, okay? Test on the monkey's
Wait, Brandon,
paw
what'd you say?
tomorrow. Chances are, you are going to be able to use your annotated story. Okay? I will not make you another copy, but you will be able to use your annotated story, and we'll have a test on the monkey's paw tomorrow. Guess I better put that up there.
Will there be an essay question where we'll have to use ACE on it?
Yes, there will be.
My ace in the hole.
I probably
No, I look at
like
that.
the unit one, get Lilith, get the blue haired girl. You know,
Look at all of that.
Do you guys think the blue-haired girl's hair cuts itself?
Yeah, why do people hate people with blue hair?
They're automatically annoying. If you dye your
Hey,
hair
Lily, you should dye
like
your hair blue,
bright
that's it.
colors, I dislike you.
yeah.
Like extremely bright,
Yeah.
like hot pink. I hate.
It's like Adriana would do.
Adriana is a goddess and stop.
I don't like people with bright hair because they're automatically annoying. Because this one dude
That looks like not me.
Okay. Wages, page 8. So we are now talking about nouns. Yesterday we talked about nouns as subjects and subject complements. Today we're talking about nouns as objects and object complements. And this is a little bit longer. There are actually quite a few different ways that nouns can be objects. Okay. Tommy, would you put the lights on? Okay, so. Whew. I need someone. Let's see. Let's have Sam read that first paragraph on page 8. Okay. Nope. Let's have Lily. Would you read that first paragraph on page 8?
A noun can be used as a direct object. The direct object answers the question whom or what after the verb. In this sentence, the direct object is centered. It answers the question, what did the community open?
Okay. The community opened a neighborhood center. Okay, so a direct object comes where in a sentence? Leah? Toward the end? Yep, toward the end. And what does it come after? What does it come after, Ariam? A verb. What kind of a verb does it come after? Linking or action? Tommy? It comes after an action verb. What question does it answer after the action verb? Bethel?
Whom or what?
Whom or what? Okay? So, it has a formula. Actually, I'll do it on here. Okay, so direct object. So what do we need to find first? What would you find first when you were finding a direct object?
The noun.
The subject.
Yep, the subject of the sentence. Oops. I should have done this. I wonder if this one will work. Okay, so you should put this in your grammar section of your notebook. So we have a direct object. And we have the formula for
Mrs.
finding
Syriac.
a direct object.
Why'd you put blue A's notes into reading notebook on 7th?
Because that's what they need to do.
Oh, they have that as well. Your trash.
Alright, so a direct object receives the action of the verb. So really simply, like if I said, I kicked the ball, okay, the ball is receiving that action of being kicked. Okay, so that's really what a direct object is. It's the word that receives the action of the verb. So a few things to know about it would be that it is found toward the end of a sentence. That it follows an action verb. If you have a linking verb and not an action verb, you will not have a direct object. Okay? Finally, we're just going to say it answers the questions, the question whom or what after the verb. So Luke, you should have out your reading or your grammar notebook, and you should be writing these things down. Okay, Lucas, you should have out your grammar notebook and you should be writing these down. Ethan, you too.
Oh, yeah.
I played real dog once. I played.
And then finally, the thing at the bottom there, that's your formula for finding a direct object. Maybe I'll put your formula in red. Okay?
Wait. Over quarantine?
Okay.
Kept us
Let's
busy.
look at
It's probably
a couple
unhealthy.
of the exercises.
Do you know what else is unhealthy?
At the bottom of the page that will help us with this, or that will help us practice. So we did have the example sentence, the community opened a neighborhood center. The subject is community, the verb is opened. Community opened what? A center. So center is your direct object, okay? So let's look at exercise 1 at the bottom of page 8. Do you have your book?
Yeah, right here.
All right, so you have to name the direct object. So I would like you to go through the process. Read the sentence, do the formula for finding the direct object so you get in the habit. So number 1, Ariam, go ahead.
Okay, some high school students take art classes every Saturday. Students is the subject, take it the action verb. Who or what is art classes? So it would be art classes or classes.
Yeah, and you could, I would not say art classes would be wrong, but really you take the main noun and it's classes. Art is an adjective describing the classes. So classes is your direct object. All right, number 2, Jameson.
Some students is a computer in art class. Students is a subject, uses the verb, computer is a
Yeah.
direct object.
Yep, very good. Okay, so computer is the direct object. Number 3, Braden.
Students draw pictures on the computer, the subject is students, verb is drawn, the direct object is pictures.
Yep, very good. Number 4, Leah.
Students are playing in an art show. Students is the subject, playing is the action verb. And show is the direct object.
Show is the direct object. Yep. Number 5. Nathan, can you do number 5?
They will invite their parents.
What's the subject?
Subject is parent, the parents.
No?
Invite,
No? Who is the
Okay.
sentence about? Who?
they,
They. And what are they going to do?
invite
Will invite
their parents.
their parents. So what is parents?
The parents is the direct object.
Parents is the direct object. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, let's go on to an indirect object. We're going to stop with the practice. Let's go on to an indirect object. So, who wants to read on page 8 that paragraph about an indirect object? Ariam, go ahead.
A noun can be used as an indirect object. An indirect object tells to whom or for whom or for what an action is done. In this sentence, the indirect object is children. We answer the question, to whom does the center offer classes?
So look at the example. The center offers children classes. Okay? So, for your notes, you are going to say an indirect object tells to whom or for whom or to what or for what an action is done.
What do they do with
Okay, so some other things about an indirect object. You cannot have an indirect object in a sentence without a direct object. You must have a direct object in the sentence in order to have an indirect object. Okay, The other thing is, an indirect object must come in between the verb and the direct object. It never comes after the direct object. So, must come What kind of a verb are you going to have, do you think, with an indirect object?
Action.
An action verb. Hello? Hi. Sure, I will. Bye-bye. The girls who go to Mr. Weir should come up at the end of class, okay? You should go up to the office. So it's an action verb, because if you have a direct object, you have to have an action verb, right?
I'm sure.
Okay, so we're going to do the formula. First you would find the subject, then you find the action verb, then you find the direct object, then you ask to whom or for whom, or these could also be what? And that equals your indirect object, and I'm just going to say IO. And let's put that in red.
Wait, how does that? It doesn't make sense because it says action verb, direct object, and then to whom, when you said it has to come between action and direct.
Right, good question. So like if you look at the sample in the book, the center offers children classes. My subject is center. My verb is offers. Okay? Center offers, what do they offer? Classes. That's my direct object. To whom? To children. Which is, and then if I look and I make sure that it's in front of the direct object, then I know that that's my indirect object. If it came after classes, it becomes something else, an object of a preposition. Okay? Okay. We're just gonna do a couple samples on page 9. Who wants to try number 8? We're looking for the indirect object. Marisol, can you try number 8?
Sure. Miss Simpson, the coordinator of the center, sends school flyers with information of the center's courses.
Subject.
Miss Simpson.
Verb. What's she doing?
Sending out school flyers.
So just give me the basic action word. Sends. Mrs. Simpson sends. What does she send?
Flyers.
Flyers. So that's my direct object. To whom? It does say who.
The center's courses.
No. Just remember, if it's an indirect object, it's going to come before the direct object.
Oh, schools.
She sends them to schools. Mrs. Simpson sends flyers to schools. Schools is your indirect object.
What if it's like an adjective? That could have been adjective too.
Nope, it doesn't because it's got an S. If it was school flyers, then it would be more like an adjective. Okay, all right. I am going to give you guys a little bit of homework.
Yay.
It's on the back of that.
It's actually not on the back of that. Practice book, page 7, but we need to look at it because you don't need to do the whole thing. Right. Practice book, page 7. You should do 1 through 14. Practice book page 7, numbers 1 through 14. Okay? And then you may leave as soon as you get that written down.
Wait, what do we have now? For an hour? And then what do we have after? Spanish?
Yeah.
And then what do we have?
Second period of